Welcome to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel. Here, we will bring you the scariest experiences through ghost stories, mysteries, and inexplicable mysteries of the mysterious world. Whether you are someone who enjoys learning about ghost stories or simply looking for a new entertainment experience, our channel will be the ideal destination. Join us in the horror space and get ready for the most tense and scary moments. Don't forget to press the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Thank you for joining the Ghost Stories YouTube channel, and now, get ready for some spooky moments with us. The Dead Spell. Chapter 6. Grandma, can I ask if Mr. Kwong's wife and children live here? I asked politely. The old woman looked at me suspiciously and blurted out, "Are you here to collect a debt? They're bankrupt, the eldest son committed suicide, and there's no money to pay. Go away, the house is also sold." She turned around to leave, and my mother and I stood stunned. Kwong, then, was originally the richest tycoon in Kwong Nin, although he died more than a handful, but with such an indescribable number of assets, how can it be said that bankruptcy is bankruptcy? Also, his son is dead. Is the house also sold? Grandma, I ran after her and pulled her sleeve. We didn't come to collect a debt. I came to meet Mrs. Van. I am her overseas relative, lost contact. After looking at us suspiciously for a while, the old lady also believed that perhaps we didn't look like we were here to collect a debt. They moved house, living in a level 4 apartment in the area. The old lady showed us the place and was about to push the cart away. I grabbed her again and asked, "Grandma, why did Mr. Kwong's son commit suicide?" People say they committed suicide because they were in debt. But I know, it's haunted, not suicide. The old woman replied, looking at me mysteriously. In the middle of the day, my spine is cold. Mrs. Van opened the door a crack and looked out. After recognizing us, she opened the door and said coldly, "You finally came here." It was as if we knew that one day we would come to see her. 1 year ago, she was still beautiful and radiant even though she was old. Sharp, clever beauty. When we met again a year later, she was like a plant whose vitality had been sucked out of her, strangely withered. The wrinkles on her once beautiful face, the viciousness evident on her face reminded me of the woman in my dream. She was still wearing her grandmother's clothes, replacing her purple shirt with a light blue shirt. Her once black hair was now speckled with silver. "Sit down." Mrs. Van directed my mother and I to sit down on the shabby table and chairs. A shabby level 4 house, 1 living room, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. Did anyone ever think that the second richest family in Kwong Nin now would have to live so miserable? "Sister, I know my family has made a lot of mistakes towards your family, but..." My mother looked at her hesitantly, her eyes red and swollen and tired. "She came looking for you, right?" Mrs. Van smiled mysteriously, turned to me and asked. I shivered. You know her?" I asked again, trembling. No. Not only did he know, he was very clear. "She killed my son." Mrs. Van excitedly clenched her fists, her teeth gritted, her eyes fierce. "It's all for her, and my beloved husband. If you play with wormwood, you'll end up with wormwood, even your children and grandchildren will have to pay the price." Playing wormwood? My mother and I looked at each other bewilderedly and asked again. "Don't you know? She played wormwood to win my husband's heart for so many years. My husband became so rich by playing wormwood." Ms. Van smirked and looked at me again. "Where is your emerald necklace? The jade bracelet?" I asked in bewilderment. I broke it." "Huh." She left her a protective talisman, which she broke again. "That talisman was supposed to be for my son, but he naturally gave it to her. And she probably predicted that she would haunt you, so she left it to you. Can you explain more clearly, why are you playing wormwood? I don't believe that you'll live such an immoral life." My mother shook her head, not believing. Maybe you misunderstood. Unethical. Mrs. Van smirked. You still dare to steal someone else's husband, or do you think that stealing someone else's husband is not virtuous? My mother faltered. I held my mother's hand and shook my head. Can you explain everything clearly? Anyway, your family and my family are also caught up in this. I went to see many shamans, but they all shook their heads and couldn't help me. I'll be honest, I've fallen into a dead end. Every night I often dream strange dreams, sometimes a soft cry, sometimes a wild laugh, a knock on the door. She is haunting my life. Mrs. Van sighed, her eyes were far away. She pointed to the altar, where there was a picture of a young man just a few years older than me. She said in a low voice, my son often tells me that he dreams of his father every night. His father was stuffed into a coffin, he couldn't struggle, he couldn't escape. My mother and I were silent. My son often tells me that he dreamed of a woman wearing ethnic clothes, with an old face but short hair. Pitch black, she has no irises. I couldn't control my trembling. Haven't I often dreamed of these things myself? In the end, the company his father left behind was at a loss, the coal mine collapsed, 3 people died, we went bankrupt, deep in debt, Mrs. Van said as if remembering, then my son died. If I can't stand it, he'll commit suicide. He used a knife to gouge out his own eye, bled to death. A death so painful and terrifying, I couldn't help but cry. My mother suddenly knelt down on the ground, holding Mrs. Van's hand. Sister, I know my sister Dio is sorry for you, we are sorry for you, but the mistakes of the previous life, please let the previous life bear it. It's only Tam is not guilty, please show us how to solve this karma. Even if I use my life in exchange for Tam's life, I will accept it, please. She said while crying. Mom, stand up, stop kneeling. I pulled my mother's hand, but my mother resolutely knelt on the ground, refusing to stand up. I can't help you guys. I have to watch my son lie down. Do you think I have a way? I can only tell you the reason why Mr. Kwong and her children have to suffer such karma. Whether or not they can solve it is up to you. On the way back to Hanoi, we were silent. I know 2 big things. First, I am not Nu's mother's child, I am the child of Aunt Dio who was mistakenly born in her youth, but also not Mr. Kwong's child, so I have to bear this karma for my mother. Second, more than 20 years ago, after accidentally giving birth to a baby girl and then sending her to my biological sister to raise, my aunt, my biological mother, moved to Quang Ninh to find a job and also to get away from the city. Gossip, being criticized by everyone for being wildly pregnant. She came to Halong to work as a beer bar employee and met Mr. Kwong. Mr. Kwong was a tall, stylish man and rich. As soon as she saw him, she fell in love and was determined to win his heart. But she knew she was not a beautiful person. Compared to Mr. Kwong's wife, she was just a very pale woman. Later, someone told her to go to Hajong to meet a witch doctor to practice wormwood. He ordered the magician to work for her, see into the future, and hold a man's heart, making him drunk on her. I don't know what that wormwood is like, but Mrs. Van said that this wormwood is definitely extremely cruel, it probably takes the blood of virgins to make it, according to her sons and my dream, it also seems to gouge out the eyes of the living to clearly see the future, that's why Mr. Kwong did so well, and my aunt held Mr. Kwong's heart tightly for so many years. Perhaps after all these years of controlling the enchantment according to their wishes, the sorcerer in Hajong died or the Dharma became weaker, so they were bewitched. First, Mr. Kwong got sick and died, and a few months later my aunt also got sick and died. But the hatred that the girl was taken to practice wormwood did not stop at her parents, that hatred also transferred to her children and grandchildren, those who were related to them by blood, Mr. Kwong's son and me, his daughter. Aunt Dia's biological mother. I clenched my fists, tears rolling down my eyes. I have never done anything evil in my whole life, but good fortune lies in the mother I thought was my biological mother turned out to not be my mother. And now, I myself am facing being beaten back by wormwood, haunted by ghosts. My life is probably about to be like Mr. Kwong's son, only measured in months and days. How do I do now? If you want to untie the knot, you must find someone to tie the knot. If you want to solve wormwood, you must find someone who plays wormwood. Lately I've been dreaming. In the dream, I held a knife to gouge out my eyes. Next to me was a woman with no eyeballs laughing shrilly and cruel. Many nights I woke up startled and found myself lying in the kitchen, a fruit knife in my hand. 1 week, my mother came to sleep with me 5 times, and 2 times she returned home with my father. I still call them Mom and Dad like always. But truly, in my heart, having a mother who abandoned her as a baby for her biological sister, and did unscrupulous things like playing tricks on her, stealing her husband, is hard to accept. I would rather not be her child. I would rather not receive a single inheritance from her, than now have to suffer the karma of what she caused. Ms. Van said that the soul of Mr. Kwong, who knew his lover was playing wormwood but conspired to help in his career, and that my Aunt Dio, or my biological mother, was locked somewhere without being able to escape or go to the underworld. Covering reincarnation. Didn't Mrs. B, who called the soul in Baek Jong, also say that Aunt Dio's soul was not there, so she couldn't call it up? I don't know where their souls are locked up now. Maybe they've been stuffed into coffins and being tortured by her every day like in my dream. Several times I sleepwalked, and when I woke up there was a sharp knife next to me. My mother discovered it and was so frightened that she told herself not to sleep and to watch over me. But strangely, no matter how much we tried to fight the sleepiness, every time after 12 o'clock we fell asleep, unable to control ourselves. Cell house. I'm sure it's not this house that's haunted, it's me who's haunted. Because one time my mother and I tried to rent a hotel to sleep, but at night I had sleep paralysis. Then it seemed like someone had kicked me off the bed and pressed on my chest, making me sob. So no matter if I sell my house or sleep anywhere, I cannot escape that obsession. I was afraid to sleep, I just wished I would never close my eyes. It won't work like this. We have to go to Hajong to find him. Thank you for taking the time to watch Ghost Stories video. Hopefully the content has brought you interesting and meaningful moments. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel to follow the channel's next videos. See you in the next video. Have a good day.